Good afternoon, everyone. Very excited to be here again for the What's in Your Backyard program for SciFest 2024. And I've just asked people to put in where they are from in their chat, and it is amazing to see the variety of locations. And I know from up in Windora, you might think, oh, it's far away. I've actually been to Windora 2 or 3 times, so it's an amazing spot. So welcome for joining us today. We've got quite a few areas in central Queensland, across New South Wales, across Victoria, Sydney as well. We have been really lucky for SciFest 2024 to have participants joining us for pretty much everywhere across Australia. And our trivia program, we had earlier today, we even had students from the Australian International School in Malaysia. So very, very excited to have everyone here today. And if there's anything you miss out on this program, we are recording it and we will share the recording with you this afternoon or tomorrow, depending on how our technology goes. So today is the launch of National Science Week. National Science Week started on Saturday, and it's essentially 10 days of amazing science programs all across the country, both in person and online. SciFest is luckily funded by Inspiring Australia New South Wales. It enables us to deliver all of these programs for you throughout Science Week for free. So a big thank you to their support over the years. And today we're going to have a look at about what's in your backyard. This year's school theme is species survival more than just sustainability. And I like to look at it from the things that you might see in your backyard. So I've got a few different things here that I'll show you, because sometimes the information and the clues about the animals that we have around us come from many different sources. So even finding something like this, we've got a couple of different size feathers. They give you different information if you know the birds. Now, I know that sometimes I find feathers, and if I smell them, sometimes they smell really strongly. And a lot of those ones are coming from water birds. So the feathers of ibis, which I actually think this one is, actually has quite a strong smell, but sometimes they won't smell at all. So feathers from water birds often have a little bit of a sense of an odor. Sometimes you might see things like this dangling from a tree. So you might recognize something like this. And this is actually a cocoon from a case moth. So inside is actually a caterpillar, and they'll come out and actually stitch with silk little bits of stick and leaves to their cocoon as it grows, and they will live in there and move around. So sometimes you see these in on fences, on the sides of buildings or the sides of trees, really, really varied different shapes and sizes, but they've actually got a caterpillar hiding inside. As the weather starts warming up, getting towards summer, we're going to start seeing these hanging upside down or on fences and trees. And these are our cicada exoskeletons. So the other sign that we've got animals like this around is the sound. So sometimes it's what they leave behind, like their exoskeleton, like a feather, like a cocoon, but other times it's the sound of them as well. So for me, it's the sound of summer when the cicadas are all happening. You might also see something like this. This one here is a small bird's nest. I actually think it's from the noisy miners, because I've seen them around. But sometimes if we look close at this one was blown out of a tree, didn't have any eggs in it, but it is got lots of green fluff and sort of clear plastic sort of string in there as well. So mixed in with natural materials. It looks like there's even sort of the stuffing out of a cushion is in there as well. So we are finding, of course, that lots of animals are using human-made products and incorporating that into sort of their nests and things like that. I've seen magpie nests with big metal coat hangers actually helping them frame. So a magpie nest is quite big, and they use it over and over. So the metal coat hangers and metal wire can actually make it really quite strong. So interesting to think that sometimes the things that we leave behind could be beneficial, but a lot of the time the things that we leave behind are actually going to cause a lot of damage to the local wildlife. This is another one just here. I'm wondering if anyone wants to put in the chat if they've ever seen anything like this. So the animal product is this. This is on a little bit of plant material from a casuarina or a she oak. And this is about the size of a 20-cent piece or so. It's a little bit flat at the moment, but it's usually quite round. So this one is empty, if that gives you a bit of a clue. Someone has already put in the chat that it's a cocoon. Got a few cocoons. So it's not actually a cocoon. So a butterfly or a moth isn't going to come out of one of these, but it is something else that is part of a life cycle, but it's not a cocoon. So it's not something they're going to change, going through that metamorphosis that we have that butterflies go through. But there is something that is part of a life cycle of an animal. Now, it's okay if you don't know the answer now, because you will know the answer by the end. Ooh, a spider sac. That is getting very, very close. It is actually an egg sac, but it's not from a spider. It is from a praying mantis. So I found, I must admit, I'm always looking for them. So that's why I find them quite a lot. And when they hatch out, if everyone just looks at their pinky fingernail, it's about the size of that. Now I've got some pictures to show you of one that I found in my backyard. So a lot of the things I'll be showing you are from my backyard. Oh, I like that. It looks like the Nimbus 2000. So I think you're right. When it's actually all like that, it does look like the seat of a little mini broom, but it is a praying mantis egg sac. So I'm just going to share my screen with you to have a look at some of these pictures. So this is another egg sac in the top corner that I've seen there. So what they do, it's actually a foamy material that has lots of the eggs inside the foam that the female kind of extrudes, and it kind of goes around the branch. So that actual bit of stick goes through it. And when they hatch out, there are hundreds of tiny eggs in that foam. So it's not kind of hollow, but when they come out, it was almost see-through. So this is one here. As I said, look at your pinky fingernail. That was about the size of when it first hatched out. It doesn't even have any color yet, but we can see already that it's got that same body shape of a praying mantis. So it's quite amazing. What we also have next to it there is the picture of one of those case moths. So this one here, it almost looks like it's wearing a fuzzy jumper, and we can see the little legs there. So it comes out and munches on leaves. So sometimes the clues of the animals that we have around are actually munch marks in leaves. So stick insects, lots of beetles, caterpillars can all give us clues if we look at the leaves. So sometimes we don't find the whole animal, we'll just find evidence that was left behind. Sometimes we might be lucky to see the adult. Again, sometimes we might just be seeing that exoskeleton like the cicada one we have in the middle here. During summer, keep an eye out. If you're hearing lots of cicadas and you're seeing lots of cicada shells, you may also be lucky to see a cicada emerge from the shells and dry their wings as they grow. Okay, so these are some other things you might see around your local environment. You may see curled leaves. So the curled leaves that we have are actually spiders. So called the leaf curling spider, and it actually curls the leaf to give it extra protection. It's using a web as well, but the leaf also gives it extra shelter. And this is a photo I was able to get through the inside of one of those curled leaves, and we can actually see that stripy body of the spider itself. And if you look at your thumbnail, that's about the size of that spider's abdomen. Now, again, a lot of the things we might see are really small. So what we've got on the bottle brush here is a tiny spider, probably only ½ a centimetre in size. And a lot of those really tiny spiders are jumping spiders, so they don't stay still very long. If we're looking around water as well, thinking about different habitats, you may see damselflies and dragonflies. And we can tell the difference between the two because damselflies will rest with their wings along their back, whereas dragonflies rest with their wings flat out to the side. So it's a little bit of a way you can tell those species that look really similar apart. And if you've got them in your area, the St Andrew's cross spiders that have usually their 8 legs sort of separated in to look like there's 4 with the zigzags in the web. So the St Andrew's cross spiders, when they're babies, they don't really know how to make that yet. So we often will see baby St Andrew's cross spiders in these little zigzags. And as I said, these are all things that I found in my backyard that can give you a clue to what you might find in yours. And remembering you're coming from different places all across Australia, so there will be different species. So there will be differences to the kinds of things that you may find. Different species of frogs, different species of birds. But the idea of protecting habitats is an important one. Down in the bottom here, we've got magpies that were actually in the back reserve behind my fence. And it was during the 2019 drought. So the ground was really, really dry. We had someone mentioning they're up in the northern rivers and they're getting lots of rain today. And so they are having all sorts of issues there with too much rain, whereas this was a situation there wasn't enough rain at all. So what we have here, these magpies are actually trying to turn the tap on. So luckily we also put water out. So a very important idea that you might need to do in summer is water for wildlife. Dry summers and dry environments, you might need to put more water out. And in areas and times that it's too wet, you might need to put rocks and things out so animals can actually get out of the water as well. Okay, so these ones here, they were trying to turn that tap on and that tap leaked just slightly. So the water bowl below was catching the water, but the weight of the magpie on the tap was just enough for it to put a little bubble of water out. And they're actually taking turns drinking out of the tap. And if we're looking here, we've got our cockatoo that's actually eating the seeds from a wattle. So after the wattles flowered, the cockatoos were coming in and eating all of those seeds. So thinking about the different plants that you have in your area to create food for pollinators and food for plant eaters as well is really important. And the idea of looking really closely. So this is my old backyard. Lots of native and non-native, but flowers and places for animals to hide. But if we look really closely, everything in these circles, the orange circles, are related to a spider. So either it's an adult spider or it's an egg sac. So we've got the adult St Andrew's cross spiders up in the side of the fence and lots of egg sacs in the middle. And this fluffy zone here, if we zoom in, oh, wrong way, are spiderlings. So they're actually the baby spiders that have just hatched out of that egg sac. And they are probably a millimetre or 2 in size. And there's hundreds there. And over time, they will actually let a piece of silk out and they will catch the wind and they will move to a different environment because they want to avoid too much competition. So too much challenge for food, they won't all survive. So if they move into different areas, they have a better chance of making it through to adulthood. But you can see all those tiny little bits of silk are all from the baby spiders. And it's my favorite baby spider name, the spiderlings. So very, very cute. And when we're thinking about habitats, we can't just think about plants and trees and grasses. We need to think about water environments as well. And sometimes it's hard to see things. So up in the top corner, we've got a larvae of a dragonfly. We've also got sort of a water stick insect here, a water strider, and animals like tadpoles as well, and water beetles, and all of those aquatic plants are all really important parts of the habitats. So not only can we think about what's in the soil, what's in the trees, what's flying around, but what's in these freshwater environments as well. Because they're part of that food chain. The animals here, many animals will live first part of their life in the water, but as adults, they'll actually be on land. A perfect example is our dragonfly here. So our dragonfly are hunters in all forms. So in the water, they're hunting other types of invertebrates in the water there. As adults, they're flying to catch flying insects and invertebrates as well. So they are really active hunters. So when they have changed and left their exoskeleton, their wings have dried, they are flying around hunting as well. So really important parts of that food cycle, and for all of the animals there as well. So always good to remember. And when we're thinking about protecting habitats, we can actually create dragonfly gardens as well. So really similar environments that you can do with your frog ponds, which I'll show you later. Lots of logs, lots of spaces for animals to get in and out, because of course, when dragonflies are flying, they don't want to go back into the water to rest. They want to rest near the water so they can eat lots of food and lots of plants and shade to attract other animals as well. And of course, creating habitats, we want to avoid using chemicals or pesticides. Now, I made a dragonfly garden when I recently moved because we had a lot of mosquitoes. And one of the favorite food sources for dragonflies when they're nymphs in the water, but as adults as well, are mosquitoes. So they make a really perfect natural pesticide, keeping out all of those mosquitoes. So very good pest control, having dragonflies around. We mentioned before with the cockatoos, seed eating, plant eating as well. So creating lots of different habitats can create environments for many species of birds and animals as well. So if we have only tall trees, we won't have a big variety of birds or animals as well. So it's really good to create a variety of habitat, both on the ground, shrubs and trees, to protect and bring and attract the biggest variety of animals in your area. So some of the animals we might just recognise from their calls. So we have lots of Australian animals that are nocturnal. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this one. This is the grey-headed flying fox. They can live in really large colonies, and they are, they're threatened throughout Australia. They are the largest of what we call our megabats. And so that's often why they're called flying foxes, because of that beautiful color as well. And they do hang out in colonies. So when they are in a group together, they can get very loud and boisterous and can cause quite a little bit of mess and noise as well. But often they will fly off from their colonies that they hang out during the day to their feeding grounds. And they're looking for bottle brushes and fruits and berries. And they spend a lot of time in cities now as well. Because we've planted lots of introduced plants, they can often be found all year round in certain places, whereas previously in their natural environment, they would have moved around different seasons to different types of plants. Another one, this is another mammal you might hear at night. So sometimes it might be possum poo that you find lying around. So sometimes poo's the clue that you've got these animals around. Sometimes it's just their sound as well. Making lots of noises in the night. Sometimes you might see them just like the flying foxes flying around just at sunset. I've got a possum that walks down my side fence just as the sun is setting to move to its feeding grounds. Now, someone here in this picture has put food out for the possums. Putting water for wildlife out during hot periods is actually really beneficial, but generally, if we feed wildlife, we change their habitat and we change how they interact with their environment, and it can actually be really harmful. So water is excellent, but try not to feed the wildlife in your local area. This is another one we might hear at night. This is a tawny frogmouth. So this is in the nightjar family, and sometimes you hear this as a kind of like almost an electrical noise. Let's see if it'll play for us today. repetitive. And the tawny frog mouths will actually often stay together in families. So if you do have one and you hear that sound, look in the trees nearby, because they're often there just with their heads up, sitting in a row, and they will stay in the same area for generations. So they will actually raise many of their young in the same neighbourhood. So often you will see the same families year after year. So this one is the powerful owl. It's the largest owl found in Australia, and it lives in tree hollows. And tree hollows are really important for many, many different Australian wildlife. But trees don't make hollows. Some of them, it takes between 70 and 100 years for them to be old enough to have dropped enough branches to create hollows. So we do need to make sure that we leave some of these older trees, as long as it's safe to do so, that maintain those hollows. Lots of our birds and mammals will use those hollows to breed. So this one's a powerful owl. Do I still have its call? Yes. And this, if you are around east coast of Australia, this sound. So I think it's that classic owl sound, that hoo hoo. I used to hear one in Sydney at about 3 o'clock in the morning. If I was out going to the bathroom, I could hear through the window, and the sound traveled such a long distance because we knew we didn't have a tree nearby that had the powerful owl. So it could have even been sort of a kilometre away that sound was travelling, that classic hoo hoo. So I just want to show you some frogs as well, because this is another animal you might recognize by its call, because frogs are far easier to identify by their sound than what they look like, because most of the time you get close to a frog, they stop calling, or they're very small. So most frogs in Australia are about 2 centimetres in size, and small and green or small and brown. Now, this is a bleating frog. I just want to have a look, show you how they make their calls. Excuse me, just sneezing there. So they actually suck air into their vocal sac, which is the bit that moves, and it's a living part of their body. So it goes into their stomach and it pushes out. And every frog species around the world makes a different call. So that's why we can identify them, their amazing calls. And sometimes they don't even sound like a frog. This one here sounds like a talking noise. So this is a fun one to try while we're playing it. So I do it by putting the tongue at the roof of my mouth and going. So I had someone describe it yesterday as someone knocking 2 rocks together. I've had people describe it as someone bouncing a tennis ball. So maybe you can make the noise as I'm playing it as well. It is very interesting. So that is the striped marsh frog. Let me see if I can play it again. So there are lots of frogs that make interesting calls. So this is the striped marsh frog and the spotted marsh frog that looks really similar, completely different sounding call. We've got banjo frogs. We have rocket frogs. There's a motorbike frog that sounds like it's revving a motorbike. So no matter where you are in Australia, you will have unique species that are found near you that you can recognise by their calls. Oh. Now, this is one that is not found as much these days in our cities as it used to, but still found very commonly all the way up the east coast of Australia. A lot of you in Queensland might be familiar with this one. This is the green tree frog, and I think it's got that classic frog sound, that kind of croak, that roar, 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 roar. And And I've had these as pets for 20 years. So they can live quite a long time. So in captivity, the green tree frog, they estimate could live up to 30 years. My green tree frogs are still going strong at 20 years. And if it's about to rain or storm, they'll often start calling as well. Talking of central Queensland, I was up at Winton at a caravan park and it was raining, and inside the fence, the metal fence poles, inside each one was a green tree frog. And as it was raining, you could hear them calling to make it echo, to make their call louder, coming out the pipes of the fence. So they are very creative about where they live and call to make the most noise. Now, making a frog habitat is a wonderful way to encourage frogs into your local environment. It may be that at your school or backyard or local park, there could be a creek or a pond that you could clear up rubbish, plant some more plants, but you can actually create these habitats even just using some PVC pipes and making frog hotels. As I said, they like those tubes to hide in and call. You can make above ground ponds, and especially during summer, even just putting water out. So there's water for the local frogs. They like a deep and a shallow zone because, would you believe, most frogs can't swim very well. So even though they spend the first part of their life as tadpoles, as adults, they're not very good swimmers. So they need different environments. Some will like a shallow area, some just like it a bit damp. They're called frog bogs. Some like the frog hotels. So a really big variety of habitats. But the best way is to research the frogs in your local area first. And you can do this with Frog ID. Frog ID is a free app that's been going, I think, for 6 years now. And you can either look at it online or you can download the app for free and you can search where you live. And it will come up with the frogs that could be found in your local area. It's got pictures, it's got what they sound like, when they might be calling, and you can actually use that app to record frogs that you hear as well. And this goes into a database, and so far they have had 1.1 million frogs verified from 225 species of the 245 we have across Australia, and they've had almost 700,000 calls submitted. And you might go, those numbers don't add up. It's because many of the calls have more than one species of frog in them. So my best one I had was up in the north coast of New South Wales. I had a frog call that had 5 different species in there, and the frog experts from the Australian Museum identify them. So a really great way that you can understand what's happening in your local area as well. Making insect hotels are another great opportunity. You might have seen the bee hotels. These ones are just using natural material, putting them in a pot or a box that has holes in the back, just to create these micro habitats for those smaller animals as well. Making a lizard lounge. Again, these can all be made in similar environments. Lots of rocks and logs and places to hide, but also places for the reptiles to sun themselves. Plants to make sure that there's food sources for the animals that they want to eat as well. And of course, having water for their, especially in the hot summers as well. Other citizen science projects that are free to get involved in is the Great Aussie Bird Count. There's a new one out at the moment for National Science Week, which is the koala count. So if you do live in an area, you have seen koalas, that is a great one to get involved with. If you've got echidnas, you've got the Echidna Conservation Science, iNaturalist Australia, you can put forward any of the plants or animals that you see. You can share with that one as well. And Red Map is mapping some of our fish. So there's fabulous opportunities for you to actually be able to put the information that you see and find about your local wildlife into these what's called a database where other people have their information as well. It's a wonderful opportunity for you to become a scientist and add that information. But the best place to start is just getting outside and having a look. We've got someone here that's saying they've got the spiny leaf insects as well, the stick insects. These are all amazing animals that you can find. So look for clues. Look for munch marks in leaves. Look for poos on the ground. Don't pick them up, but you can actually look. If you take photos of them, you can actually go online and identify them. You may even find bits of bone. So we can actually tell the difference between a reptile bone and a mammal bone by how it's joined. Mammal bones have flat surface here, so I know that this is probably from a small kangaroo. But the reptile bones have a ball and socket joint, so they actually fit together differently. So we can identify so many of the animals around us by clues that are left behind and remembering a lot from those sounds. So what I'd like to hear from now is questions from you. Please put them in the chat or the Q&A. If you have questions about things that you have found in your backyard and you are not sure what they are, or your local environment. Let's have a see what some people can come up with. So you can pop it in the Q&A or the chat. Why do leaf insects look like leaves? That is a really good question. So it's all about safety and protection. So stick insects are all vegetarians. So they are trying to hide. So they're trying to camouflage and protect themselves. So if they don't look like an animal to eat, they're going to survive better. So their color helps them camouflage. The shapes of their legs and their limbs help them either look like a leaf or a stick. So it's really important. And the way they move weirdly as well to try to blend in and not look like what they actually are. So that is exactly the reason we have animals that will mimic and they will look like other things. There is lots of really good examples. The stick insects, they're young, they hatch out of a tiny egg, they get dropped out of the tree. So imagine they get dropped down 30 meters and they actually collected by ants. So the ants will collect the stick insect eggs because they have little protein, little food markers in them. They're protecting those eggs from predators. When they hatch out, they look like ants. So the stick insects are even pretending to look like ants at that point so that they can crawl out and then climb straight up a tree. As soon as they shed their skin for the first time, they look like stick insects. So they're using so many different types of behavior to protect themselves. So great question. We've got someone that's been seeing a blue-tongued lizard around. So they're the largest of the Australian skink species. The shingleback and the blue-tongued lizard. You've got garden skinks, water skinks, a really big variety, but you've got the blue-tongued lizards has that classic blue tongue, again, used as defense. Opens its mouth, sticks its tongue out, tries to look super scary. What predators do frogs have? Thank you, Jeanette. So predators for frogs, it's a lot of them. So in some cases, it's bigger frogs, birds, owls. So I had the southern boobook owl living in some woodland behind my house, and we used to have a lot of Perrin's tree frogs. And the Perrin's tree frogs would call really, really loudly. Then one afternoon or one evening, about 7 o'clock, the boobook owl, hoo-hoo, 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 or the frogs stopped. We did not hear frogs for the next 2 days because one of the predators for the frogs were boobook owls. So they're often living quite close by. I have seen really big spiders catching frogs, snakes, lizards, will all be doing those as well. But the biggest impact of our frogs is actually habitat destruction as well. So they are quite great to have around. So creating those protections are really important. What is the biggest frog in the country? So the largest frog, unfortunately, is not native. It's the cane toad. The biggest native frog is the green tree frog. Generally, they can get quite large because they're long-lived as well. Some of the eastern banjo frogs get quite big as well. But yeah, so they can sort of get to about almost sort of 10 centimeters in size. Our average large frog size is about 6 to 8 centimeters, but again, the majority of frogs are quite small. How many pet frogs did you have? Well, I had 3. Unfortunately, one died in May, but it lived for 20 years. So I still think that was pretty good. And so I still have 2. Do dragonflies bite? A great question. If you are a small flying insect, absolutely. I haven't really held a live dragonfly because they don't want to sit still. I have been bitten by a large grasshopper though, so they do have quite munchy mandibles and that can hurt. But yeah, I presumably they probably could, but I think they'd be so quick that they don't want to stay still. What is your favorite creature and have you found it? Ooh, okay. So my 2 favorite things are praying mantis, and yes, I have been really lucky to find praying mantis. And again, it's because I'm looking. I'm out there looking for different clues, and so that's why I tend to find more. But one of my favorite creatures is actually the cuttlefish. So I don't have one in my backyard, but when I go scuba diving around Sydney, I usually will see a cuttlefish. So they're some of my favorite. Is something green that looked like a spider? Okay, so there are very small spiders, about a centimetre in size, called jumping spiders that are green. So if they were really quick and jumping, you would have been out seen the green jumping spider. There's also green huntsmans. So if it looked like a huntsman body shape, it could absolutely be one of the green huntsmans. So you just have to keep an eye out. How long does a caterpillar live for? Well, it depends on the species. I've had some like this before, the case moths. Those caterpillars lived for about 6 months. So it really depends on the species. Different ones will grow at different rates and then go through metamorphosis at different rates. So it can vary. How long do dragonflies live for in their adult form? It's sort of months. Some invertebrates will live for years, but most of them don't. Most of them are pretty seasonal. Why do stick insects have such long legs? Again, it's part of their camouflage, but also it helps them with their movements as well. Can frogs bite people? Yes, but they don't have teeth. So when I feed my green tree frogs, occasionally they've latched onto my finger and I kind of got to try to shake them off. It doesn't hurt. It's just a surprise. After we built one of the frog hotels, how long before it would become inhabited? Again, it varies. It could be a year, it could be 2 years. It's really a varied situation. So, but if you build it, they will eventually come. But definitely research the frogs in your area so you can work out which ones, which type of habitat you need to build. How many spiders survive from each egg sac? It would be different every time. Some would survive a lot longer, especially if they disperse and move around. They've got a much better chance of survival. If mantises are carnivores, what types of insects do they eat? Anything they can fit in their mouth. Or anything they can grab. So there are some big praying mantis that can eat small lizards and frogs. Generally, invertebrates will eat other invertebrates, so animals without a backbone, but the praying mantis and some of the big spiders are exceptions to that. So they can actually eat small invertebrates. Why do plovers nest in the open? Yeah, very interesting. We get some species that will nest really, really open, and they're very protective of their nest. So it makes it very tricky if they're sort of just out where they are. How important is to keep pets inside at night? I think it is really important, especially with cats. So cats are amazing animals and they are designed to hunt. And especially when they've got owners, they want to show love by giving you presents. And those presents are often dead frogs, dead mice, dead birds. So a cat on average, they can probably eat a couple of animals a night. So between one cat outside every night, it could eat, 300 to 400 to 500 animals a year. So definitely good to keep inside, or have a cat run. So they're becoming really popular. So the cats can go outside, but they actually can't go and hunt needlessly. How do cicadas look before and after they shed their skin? So when they're nymphs, they look like this. So there's small nymph cases, and they're under the ground until they come out. When they're adults, they've got their wings, their full wings coming out. There's quite a lot of really cool videos about them shedding their skin. If camouflage animals don't move, can predators not see them? Most of the time that's true. Some predators, they can pick up UV reflections and heat signatures and things like that. So it can be, it can be really challenging. A blue-tongued lizard licked my hand. Is it poisonous? No, they are not poisonous. The only really dangerous poisonous animal we have in Australia would be the cane toad. How many eggs can a spider lay? Whew, hundreds. Most egg sacs will have hundreds of individual eggs inside. Why do snakes shed their skin? It is to grow. The same way as the invertebrates will shed their skin to grow, the snakes do the same. So it actually gives them a bigger chance to grow. Why are ants so small? Well, they work together in teams, so they've been able to get away with being really, really small. But some of them can be quite big. The big bull ants are sort of, well over, 2 centimeters in size. I'm skipping ahead a little bit because we have so many questions. Is it safe to hold a stick insect or a stick bug? Yes, if you're really careful. But the thing is, sometimes the animals look like other things. So you want to be really careful that you're not actually picking something up that is, say, a spider that's just pretending to look like a stick insect. So I would say be very careful. Best not to pick anything up at all. If you're not sure, ask an adult. Do possums remember people they've seen? Sometimes. I would say if they're used to people coming to the same place over and over, then yes, they would. There are lots of very strange looking worms. Some of the largest worms we've got is in Victoria in Gippsland, 2-meter long earthworms. But the biggest variety of amazing worms are in the ocean. How do snails stop eating my veggie garden without hurting them? You need to look up some really amazing natural pesticides. There's things like putting cinnamon or crushed eggshell to use as pesticides. So there's some really great options there to help with that. If I were building a frog habitat, would the frogs fall in and get trapped? So the frogs that you're trying to use for the frog tubes are tree frogs. So they've got sticky pads on their fingers and toes that they can climb in and out. The ground-dwelling frogs, they can't climb up the outside to get in it, so they wouldn't get stuck. That's a really great question. So that's why you need to research the animals that you have around you to work out the best types of habitats. And I'm going to share some links about the making frog hotels, frog habitats, and dragonfly hotels, and I'll be able to share that with everyone following up. How do bugs breathe underwater? It varies. Some of them create a little bubble and will go underwater with that bubble, and they'll use that. Some of them breathe through their bum, which is really cool. So some of them will have like a little snorkel that will come in and out of their abdomen, and so they kind of float with that sticking out, and it's like a breathing snorkel. Some of them will actually just hold bubbles of air in their abdomen as well. So there's a really amazing way that they can do that. So very big variety. We've got another question here. What are frogs eating? Now, frogs definitely, it's anything they can put in their mouth. Frogs are really weird. They don't have tongues the same way do. If everyone just has a bit of a swallow, our tongue sits at the back of our throat and it actually helps us swallow. Frogs don't have that. Their frogs' tongues at the front, so they can kind of flick their tongue out to pull food in. But what it means, if they've got something really big in their mouth, they can't swallow it. So they'll actually push their eyes in to the top of the roof of their mouth, and it helps push the food down. So frogs will try to eat anything they can fit in, but they have to use their eyeballs to push it through into their stomach. Do insects and ants have bones? No, they've got those exoskeletons. So skeletons on the outside that give them support and strength because they are an invertebrate. It's only vertebrate animals like birds, frogs, reptiles, fish, and mammals that have those internal skeletons. The tiniest bug we've been asked, they are so small. The tiniest bugs you need to see in a microscope, often living in leaf litter and those kinds of things. How long can a blue-tongued lizard live? It's estimated between 25 and 30 years. Again, it depends if it's in captivity and looked after or in the wild. Oh, so many questions. What do owls eat? So most of the owls are predators. So they are eating frogs, lizards, small mammals, birds. So a really big variety of food there. Oh, what's the prettiest color frog? I think the green and golden bell frog is really lovely. It's got this quite metallic looking gold. And if you saw under their arms, it's bright turquoise blue. So it's quite amazing. And the smallest frog on earth, I think, is about the size of your pinky fingernail. It is really small. It's not an Australian frog. Are there any frogs in Australia that are poisonous? So the cane toad is our poisonous frog. How do ants carry so much weight? It is part of their body shape that allows them to do that, to carry so much weight. So they are particularly strong. So strength is one of their superpowers. And yeah, they can carry things many, many times their own weight. Why do dragonflies keep their wings out when they rest? So it's part of just one of the things of their species. So dragonflies will rest with their wings flat out to their body, and damselflies will rest with their wings flying back. So it's just one of the ways we can identify them. Whether there's a particular reason for each species doing that, I'm not 100% sure. How do insects survive in the rain? Sometimes they just hide. So a lot of the time they might be hiding under the leaf litter, hiding on trees, and yeah, they're pretty waterproof, so they can survive quite well. Where do beetles live? It depends on the beetle. Most of them are living in the leaf litter, so under the leaf material there, under bark, and when they're in their grub form, under the ground. Ooh, how long does it take for a cocoon to fully develop? Again, it will vary on the species. So once the caterpillar eats enough food, it will form that chrysalis, and then essentially it kind of liquefies itself to change its entire body composition, and it does take, weeks, but it does vary depending on the species. How many species of spider are there? Across the world, there's about 30,000 species of spider. Australia depends on how you look at it, really lucky to have a really big variety of spiders, from really, really small things like the jumping spider and the peacock spider, all the way up to the banded huntsman. Really great natural pest controllers as well, having our spiders around. Why do lorikeets come out after the rain? A lot of the birds will come out after the rain because they're hungry. They've been hiding in hollows, or waiting for the rain to stop. So often they're coming out to get food. Some of the birds might be coming out because you think about magpies, ibis, or kookaburras, any of the birds that are eating things from the ground. Sometimes the ground's wet, so their grubs and worms have moved to the surface, and it's easier for those birds to catch the worm, so to speak. What's the difference between a praying mantis and a grasshopper? So praying mantis are in a particular group called the mantids, and they are all carnivores. Grasshoppers are in a group with crickets, grasshoppers, and locusts. They do all have these munchy mouth parts. Some of them will eat other insects, but most of them are vegetarians and eating grain. So there's a whole lot of difference about their body shape, the shape of their head. So praying mantis has sort of a really weird triangular shaped head on a long neck, whereas grasshoppers and crickets, they don't really have a neck at all. Their heads kind of like follows the shape of their body. What have we got? think we've got some doubles up. How old can cockatoos get? They can be quite long-lived. Certainly some that have been in captivity, you know, have lived for decades. In the wild, it's always less because there's more pressures if different climates, in case it's a hot summer, there's a drought, and also other predators. And often if there's an injury in the wild, the animal won't survive. Whereas if it's a pet and there's an injury, it can often get vet care. So that's how it can differ. How do you get a snake away from your house without hurting it? Well, Christine, most people are injured by snakes trying to kill it. So it's a really good question because you don't want to hurt it and you don't want to get injured yourself. So if there's a problem with a snake inside, you can actually call wildlife rescuers and snake handlers, and they will come and move it to a safer location. It's a really tricky one. It may well be that there's a food source nearby. So diamond pythons and carpet pythons will often come in homes if there's rats and mice around. The same with some of the other snakes will be really keen to eat those mice, but they won't get up into your roof. So it is certainly one of those things that you should probably just stay away. Hope it goes on its own. If not, call a wildlife control or a wildlife rescuer, and they can help out with that one, because it's certainly something that snakes and spiders are best outside. How old do spiders have to go off on their own? They really do it quite quickly, because the sooner those spiders can leave, the better chance they have of survival, because when they're all there together, the ones that start getting a bit bigger will start eating the smaller ones as well. Okay, I've got a chance for a few more questions. I apologise to everyone that we will not get to all of these questions because there've been so many. I love it when the questions come in, but I will be sharing lots of follow-up resources that will hopefully answer your questions. And if we don't get to your answer, please feel free to reply to that email with your follow-up questions. I'm very happy to help. What's your favorite ant species? I have never been asked my favorite ant species. Thank you very much. I think they are going to have to be the bull ants. Now, in saying that, I'm allergic to bull ants. I don't want to get stung by them again because I have an allergic reaction, but they are so impressive. I saw one a few months ago that was metallic blue, and it was about 2.5 centimeters in size, and it was just really, really impressive. What's the biggest animal in Australia? Well, it depends on your definition of big. I think it's probably your saltwater crocodile is the biggest. So they are really impressive. How kangaroos fit under fences being so big? Interestingly, most of the time they're jumping over the fences. So it will depend on whether there's gaps underneath the fences or not, but they are amazing jumpers. So often they are just leaping over, sort of your meter high fences, and off they go. Oh, excellent. You've got stick insects in the classroom there. Oh, lots of thank yous. Yes, thank you to everyone that has had to leave already. Where can you find a frog? Well, the best thing about frogs are they are found in pretty much every habitat. We even have the corroboree frog found in those alpine areas of New South Wales and Victoria, so in cold environments. But we have frogs found in the desert, so we have the water-holding frogs and burrowing frogs. But generally, frogs are found in warmer tropical areas. So the further north you go, the more frogs that you are going to be finding. They like those warm environments. But there are frogs found everywhere throughout Australia. So look at Frog ID, find out where you are and see the species of frog that are near you. Listen to the calls, because there may be frogs near you that you just didn't know they were there. Christine's also asking what starts the process of tadpoles turning into frogs. So it's usually time. But what we find is some frogs that have turned into tadpoles really late in the season, there's not enough time and food energy for them to go through that whole metamorphosis process before it gets cold. So we sometimes will find tadpoles all through winter. And when it warms up, they'll then turn into tadpoles. So we do see that from time to time as well. Someone was asking what my profession is. I am a science communicator, so I know a little bit about a lot of things. So that's what my profession is, but my background is in geology and paleontology and rocks. And my passion is marine environments and scuba diving. And sometimes it is just about looking around about what's around you. So that's why I do a lot of the what's in your backyard sessions, so you can get an idea of the things that are just around the corner. So really important to listen and look out for some of those amazing animals. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me and sticking around to go through some of those amazing questions. I will share lots of follow-up resources with you all, and I look forward to seeing you in some of our other sessions for the rest of National Science Week. And a big thank you once again to Inspiring Australia New South Wales for funding once again SciFest